So, in continuation with poverty in India, and we're going to talk about the shortcomings of the poverty alleviation programs, and or we can talk. You can get a question and give a critical assessment of the poverty alleviation programs, or the poverty alleviation programs have not been successful. Comment or comment or talk about the poor performance of the poverty alleviation programs. So the answer to all these questions are one and the same, is that there were no follow-up actions that were there. It was wrong targeting. Interior areas could not be reached. People were not even aware. People were not aware for whom the programs were made. So that was again a very sad thing. And another thing is the power groups, or the panchayats and people who are powered, or the moneyed people of the village, they did not educate the poor about what were the programs for them. In fact, they used this platform to give aid to the people whom they felt according to their whims and fancies. And so that again, that was there. And then there was a lack of participation of the poorest of the poor in the programs that were to be followed. So just go through this while I just go telling you about it. So here you can see that I've just mentioned. So we feel that the assistance provided under these programs has not been given to the persons who were really poor. And the definition of poor was not clear, and many non-poor took advantage of the programs. And it was found that the anti-poverty programs ignored the very poor. And another thing was improper implementation. The concerned staff and administration were inefficient, corrupt, and they were not trained for the work assigned to them. And there was no monitoring of it. The implementation was not monitored. Non-participation of local level institutions also resulted in improper implementation of the programs. So another thing that we find was, in this itself, those in charge of the programs favored the educated, rich, or the resourceful persons of the area rather than the real poor. And it was also found that remote areas and poor households located in the interiors of the villages were neglected. This was due to the fact that they could not be reached. Accessibility was not there. Then even certain institutions that provided credit or marketing, they were not really supportive to the programs. And as mentioned earlier, power groups in the villages started exercising control over delivery of the funds of the poverty alleviation programs, or whom to deliver, who were to benefit, they decided. So this was really a sad thing in the whole thing, because the really poor received only a very little amount of the aid that was apportioned for them, or that was earmarked for them. So that was found. And it was found that these the PAPs were largely government-sponsored programs and lacked participation of the people. And another thing that was found was that they were not linked with overall development strategy. That means that it did not consider the fact that the poor would be able to take advantage of the uh, PAPs, the poverty alleviation programs, owing to their lack of awareness and initiative. And even if they were giving employment, it was not in the whole scheme of things. It did not show growth which had to be shown. It is undoubtedly that the government has spent huge amount of money on poverty alleviation programs, but looking at that, the desired results are not available. And the basic thing is corruption. So, in fact, the late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi once remarked that of the total help earmarked for the poor, only 15% actually reached them. So, this was the thing that we see in the lacunae we see in the poverty alleviation programs. And this has to be overcome. And talking about that, just talking about poverty, just a little question as to, suppose if you are a resident of the village, if you're staying there, and what would the changes that you'll bring about to see that the poor are no more there? How will you tackle the poverty? This is see, as you can see, it's an NCERT question that you can see for yourself. And in this, I just made one categorizing poverty as, you make a poverty line. There are the chronic poor, who are always poor and usually poor, and then there are the transient poor, which we spoke before. You can just say transient means only for a short while. That means sometimes they are poor, sometimes they above the poverty line, so they're churning through it. So these are like small farmers and seasonal workers, and sometimes occasionally poor because of some bad luck or something. And then there's people who are never poor, so they are the non-poor. So this is just a diagram for you to see. So there we go.